Alldus podcast is brought to you by Alldus International, supplying your expert AI and digital transformation staffing needs across the US and Europe. Today, you are listening to our AI in Action series, where leading minds in AI from across the world share their story, success, and advice. AI in Action cuts through the hype and explores the true impact of artificial intelligence in our world today.
You are listening to the Alldus podcast as part of our AI in Action series. I am your host, Mark Kelly, Chief Customer Officer at Alldus International. In today's show, we are very happy to welcome Enes Hosgor. Enes is the CEO and founder of Gesund.ai. Enes, great to have you on the show today.
It's my pleasure, Mark. Thank you for having me.
So Enes, before we jump into some of the work that you're doing at Gesund.ai, tell me a little bit about your journey to now, because you've been in quite a few different locations before you got started into Gesund.
Professionally, I've been building machine learning products and companies the last 10 plus years. I guess I got into it first during my PhD work at Carnegie Mellon in the United States. And ultimately, I spun off my doctoral research into a venture that was designed to process high-frequency data for electric utilities. And so I cut my teeth in this high-compliance environment way back. And after we got acquired late 2018 by an incumbent, I moved to Berlin because of family reasons. And since then, since early 2019, I've been in charge of the data science function of a MedTech company named Caresyntax that is historically headquartered in Berlin, has operations worldwide. So I founded and led their machine learning division for the last few years before I decided to step down to launch my next venture, Gesund.ai, which is designed to enable the broader medical AI community with a privacy-first infrastructure.
And when you scratching that itch, what made you so passionate about this work to do? Because privacy in general is a very hot topic. So it's very hard now not to see some type of commentary on the internet wherever we are. What kind of got you focused with?
Sure. As a mission-driven entrepreneur, I've always been drawn towards real-world problems and some of these deep tech-related ventures that were designed to add real value to the society. And when you combine that with data science and machine learning, you get a really interesting mix, because if you think about it, this commercial grade and scalable AI is currently being conducted mostly by very few select organizations, the usual suspects, the Amazons and the Netflixes of the world, who own and control the user experience and their data. And as such, in this is in a vertically integrated data value chain, it's a pipe dream for a data scientist. You have neatly packaged data, a ton of it. You have all the best-in-class tools at your disposal. But when you go to highly regulated industries like healthcare, data scarcity is omnipresent. And as such, you have to find workarounds as far as how you can access data, which is the core pillar to any scalable, robust AI solution, as we all know. So you need to, put that privacy-preserving mindset at the core such that you can access data at scale and ultimately build a generalizable and reliable solution that can, help create clinical outcomes in a number of different ways. So my passion is because we don't have data, we don't have tools in these highly regulated environments. How can we change that to create clinical grade AI?
So for people that actually aren't working in the healthcare sector, they can probably be naive to understanding some of the challenges there are to AI adoption and innovation. Can you maybe share some examples from your past experience of working in highly regulated sectors about what needs to be done?
This industry remains a challenge for even some of the biggest players. I'm sure you've seen Google and Apple shutting down their healthcare divisions, given some of the challenges, even though these guys have all the resources and the top talent and the technology tools that anybody can imagine. That being said, from my personal experience, when it comes to the medical domain, accessing data is a challenge because the users of data, i.e., technology creators, AI algorithm owners, however you want to name them, and then in the healthcare space, you can think of some of the well-funded upstarts all the way to the major companies, the GEs and the Siemenses and the Philipses of the world. And the challenge here is that these guys have the talent and the technology, but they don't have data. And who does the data reside with? And that's typically the hospitals. And so when you have that kind of disconnect as far as who owns and who needs data, then you have that, cultural as well as regulatory as well as contractual and technology conflicts that need to be ironed out. And in my experience, I had to do data sharing business agreements with individual clinical institutions in my past role at Caresyntax, and unfortunately those agreements usually are one-on-one transactions that can take months or even in some cases years. And when the hospital does not have the appropriate technology infrastructure, especially places like Europe where a cloud infrastructure is not exactly the preferred medium for many hospitals in the continent, then how do you facilitate that data access in a machine learning friendly manner? And that's why we had to, at Caresyntax, using that most recent example, I had to cobble together solutions, open source tools, academic tools for annotation, or tools that were not designed for healthcare, but let's say for autonomous vehicles. I had to bring them in, and sometimes I had the resources to build in-house tools to build pipelines and build my own annotation task force and do my business agreements on a one-on-one fashion. But these are very hard to scale, and these are very costly. And given we are still in the early days of the AI revolution in healthcare, we need better sets of picks and shovels that streamline the machine learning lifecycle, as well as provide access to data at scale. And that's why we need to change the mindset from how the machine learning is being generated and adopted in these different highly regulated entities.
Yeah, so changing mindset, that can be a pretty challenging thing because of the background and bureaucracy and years of just doing it certain ways. And there's so many different stakeholders to engage with. What type of trends do you see happening across digital health that stand out to you?
I'm pleased to express that COVID has really piqued digital health awareness. Whenever we talk to potential customers or clinical partners or technology partners or investors across the board, we see a level of enthusiasm and interest and proactive attitude that I have not observed before. So I think the timing on laying the foundation for the next generation digital health infrastructure that is designed around analytics and machine learning and not just billing, unfortunately, which is the status quo in healthcare. All the software solutions are designed around billing, not how to get data, how do you connect data silos, or how do you create insights or business intelligence or algorithms out of that data. That's what we need to do. And the trends we see is that, sure enough, the regulators are still trying to catch up on the technological advances that AI has introduced into the healthcare domain. In many ways, still quite the Wild West, if you will, as far as how do you build, evaluate, and adopt AI solutions in healthcare. And regulators are trying to be cognizant on the challenges and try to engage all the different stakeholders. That being said, as the regulations, appropriate regulations and encouraging regulations come in play, until then, many players, depending on where they are in the world, whether it's Asia, Europe, or the United States, they are adopting a number of approaches to circumvent the lack of best practices and the policies and the regulations that could further accelerate AI adoption. And in that sense, sure enough, data licensing and data sharing and data transactions are not unheard of. Many organizations across the world have been licensing de-identified healthcare data to third parties, and there's quite a number of examples of that. That is not exactly encouraged in all the jurisdictions we can think of. And until those policies are in place, some privacy preserving machine learning methods are emerging. And one approach that we are taking to heart and who sits at the core of our platform is federated learning, whereby you don't bring data to algorithms, but you bring algorithms to data, meaning the data never leave the hospital's premises, and you only train your algorithms locally in a distributed fashion at the hospital across a multitude of hospitals, and only extract the model parameters to build a global model more robust and generalizable than it would have been otherwise had it only had access to a single site worth of clinical data. But other examples include synthetic data or encryption, things like that. Some of these solutions are emerging depending on the use case. They're preferable, or depending on their vertical as well. Some of these solutions are emerging in the finance industry as well. But we believe that the technology pioneers are trying to fill this gap in regulations and with novel privacy-preserving machine learning framework.
You are listening to the Alldus podcast. When you're looking to scale your team, or if you are interested in showcasing your company in a future episode, reach out today. Or if you're in the market for a new role, visit our website to view open positions, www.alldus.com.
And it kind of ties in nicely to my next question. What kind of role should policymakers assume in AI and digital health? Because we've obviously had the recent proposed regulation of AI that the EU have proposed. We talk about particular sectors within healthcare, medical device, medical high-risk AI. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And every policymaker, and depending on where you are in the world, might have a different take on it. When you go to China, there's definitely a different attitude as far as how data is being monetized on or shared versus the US, where the advertising industry, for example, just as an example, has hugely benefited from using consumer data. Or Europe is more on the citizen or consumer-friendly approach with some of the privacy and security considerations that pertain to, let's say, GDPR. Policymakers will probably have a different attitude depending on where they are in the world. But ultimately, it's fair to say that the policies need to be designed such that, one, data access needs to be facilitated and sponsored by these government stakeholders, and in an equitable fashion, such that it is not only in the hands of a select few, as well as, there is a practical and meaningful way to accessing that data without compromising individuals' fundamental constitutional rights or privacy, and also thereby paving a path to the next wave of innovations, because we're really at the verge of the next industrial revolution. Because with the advent of clinical grade AI, I believe we'll see a whole plethora of inventions, breakthroughs that will impact anywhere from how cancer treatments are being designed, like precision medicine, to automating some of the diagnostic workflows, let's say in pathology or radiology, reducing the workloads and enabling physicians, reducing the physician burnout, etc. So there's a really positive outlook on the array of inventions that could come out of unlocking and democratizing healthcare data, but without, again, compromising privacy and security. So those are all possible, but regulators, they have a particular role to assume here, such that they need to connect patients and healthcare providers and technology providers and grassroots organizations. There's a whole host of different stakeholders that need to be present at the table and make sure that those policies are designed to pave the path to the next set of breakthroughs in healthcare and life sciences, but also make sure that some of the collaborations can lead to more constructive efforts across different industries and within and without healthcare. And as you mentioned earlier, the current best practices in medical device or medical technology certification are not transferable to AI, given it's a completely different beast. And the regulators some of them are really proactive about engaging key opinion leaders and academics and technology pioneers to understand and make sure that we can build these technologies and while addressing some of these corner cases.
I think it's really interesting because the only silver lining of COVID has been the digital transformation of so many different industries and companies, and the investment in healthcare has just been considerable, and it's been great to see. And I think for a lot of people, they can forget the burnout that can have of practitioners within this space, but also the skill shortages within this space. So there's so many opportunities to unlock problems that can add significant to users. And the thing about healthcare is everybody is related or can relate to this through themselves, through family, friends. It's a problem that everybody can have some type of energy towards solving as well, which gives me real hope that if policymakers can design, taking into consideration that solution first and all the different stakeholders, there's a real platform for growth to solve some of these problems.
Absolutely, and I can't agree more. And of course, there's a whole spectrum of ethical considerations around how do you turn a black box of an algorithm into an explainable and reliable and interpretable solution can create measurable clinical outcomes. But that's why the space is so exciting, because we're in the early days, and with that, there'll be other ecosystems that will be spawned off of the healthcare AI revolution.
So tell us a little bit more about your new venture, Gesund.ai.
Absolutely. So again, turning my experience in building machine learning products in highly regulated environments, I always saw that we had to, again, cobble together solutions. It's been mostly patchwork of different solutions that were not designed for our particular vertical, that has specific constraints around security, privacy, compliance considerations. And Gesund is basically a privacy-first MLOps platform that is trying to equip the medical data scientists with the right tools to streamline their machine learning pipeline, all the way from data access in a privacy-preserving manner using federated learning, all the way to annotating their work by using expert task forces to training and clinical validation and post-market surveillance, which will leverage some of the MLOps elements that pertain to deployment, production, and monitoring of these algorithms. So if you think about it, software development is what it is today. You would say, software eat the world, but that's thanks to the decades of investments and hard work the community has put in, and also the cloud revolution, the AWS of the world, trying to democratize how people build and deploy and maintain software solutions. We need that kind of a revolution in healthcare machine learning as well, where data owners and data users are not connected in any shape or form. And that's why we're trying to build this end-to-end machine learning platform, starting with data access, ending with clinical monitoring of the performance of the algorithms, such that medical AI companies can focus on just the product side, the clinical product side, and hire the best MDs and PhDs and outsource the tedious and repetitive engineering infrastructure related work to our venture, who will be focused on that as the crux of our initiative.
Yeah, it's a problem worth solving, and I can see why it gives you a lot of energy to try to work and solve it. You've been listening to the Alldus podcast as part of our AI in Action series. I'm your host, Mark Kelly, Chief Customer Officer at Alldus International. And today I've been speaking with Enes Hosgor. Enes is the CEO and founder of Gesund.ai. And we've been talking about Enes's background to now, some of the projects that he's been working on, and some of his old ventures that inspired him to work on his new venture, Gesund.ai. We're talking about some regulation in AI in healthcare, and also some of the applications of that and benefits to the end user. We finally talked about the problem that Gesund.ai is actually working on, and the importance of privacy to building a strong foundation. Enes, thank you very much for your time today.
It's been my pleasure. Thank you so much for the opportunity, Mark.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Alldus Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. We are available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and any Android podcast of choice. You can also head over to our website, www.alldus.com, to listen to more podcasts, view our open roles, and stay up to date with industry news. Thanks for listening, and stay tuned for more great episodes coming very soon.